Hey everybody, this is going to be just an overview of Unit 3, Secession. I'm not going to do the videos. I'm going to let y'all watch those on your own and then follow the instructions in the makeup work folder. You'll write 3 sentences about each video and then you'll respond to all the colored prompts. You'll copy the prompts into Word and answer below. So I'm just going to hit the high points of this. Okay, so we're going to talk about the sort of the precursors for the Civil War. We've already talked about the Missouri Compromise, how Missouri was allowed in as a slave state, Maine as free, and then the new rule was that line below Missouri that said no one above. The Mexican-American War, the United States gained a lot of territory. And almost immediately after, the Wilmot Proviso was passed, which said that there were going to be absolutely no slavery in this new territory. And southern states had all fought. Many men had died from the South, and they'd fought, and now they were being told, you're not allowed to use this land, which they were very frustrated about. And so the compromise that comes after this, because of that, it doesn't pass in the Senate. People are very frustrated about it. And so the compromise that they agree upon was something called popular sovereignty, and it's exactly what it sounds like. They said, what if in each of these new territories the people vote? And remember the 3 steps of the way that you became a state, when you first had an assembly, let's let the people vote. And that seemed like a very democratic solution. Perhaps that was going to be the thing that saved the whole conflict. And what we know is basically because during the territorial period, there were not going to be any restrictions, that by the time in any of the agricultural areas where things would grow well, by the end of that time, there were going to be so many slaves there already that it wasn't really going to be popular sovereignty. It was going to be a de facto slave state. So, the election of 1848 comes. You can see this is one of the earlier elections where you don't see it strictly on the slavery and free line. There are a lot of other things at play. Zachary Taylor was a famous war hero. And he beat the guy saying free soil, free speech, free labor, and free men. And so it's clear that there was still a significant amount of people pro-slavery, even in areas that didn't have slaves, because the entire country was benefiting from slavery. The warehouses in the north, the factories that were processing the cotton. It wasn't just the places where the cotton grew. So next we have the Compromise of 1850. This is going to be the next step in the compromise. In the slavery-free, the precursor to the Civil War, the next little compromise. And again, California and New Mexico both want to enter the Union. They both want to enter as free, which of course frustrates all the Southerners because it is going to shift the balance of power, and it is going to shift it to there being more free states than slave. And so they come up with the Compromise of 1850, which does allow California to be admitted as a free state, but they passed this thing called the Fugitive Slave Act, which is going to have very strict provisions for capturing runaway slaves for years and years. The Underground Railroad has been allowing slaves to escape, and so because of that, this is considered a victory for Southerners, because it means even if your slave somehow made it to the Underground Railroad, that they were going to have to be returned. If you look at this, the delaying of the Civil War, and there's a video here that I want you to watch, but this I just want you to think about this. It's so clear that as we move west, this is only amplified, and Henry Clay keeps writing all these compromises to try to get both sides to have the most fair option, but the reality is it is very clear that eventually this is going to culminate into the Civil War. Okay, one thing that exacerbated these divisions is something called Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was a fictional book about slavery, life on a plantation. It obviously portrayed Southerners very badly. And actually, the lady who wrote it had never even gone to a plantation, so much of it was exaggerated, but it just furiously exacerbated these divisions. It made people who were against slavery point to it as fact. It made people who had slaves go, this isn't true, this is not how it really is, and she's never even been on a plantation. So the next little step, we have the Missouri Compromise, then we have the Compromise of 1850. The next step in these stepping stones towards the Civil War is going to be the Kansas and Nebraska Act. You can see this map over here on my left, and basically this says there's obvious divisions. You can see that some are free, some are slave, but the argument is going to be Kansas and Nebraska, how are we going to determine whether they're slave or free? They agreed to repeal the Missouri Compromise, which, as you can see in this map, the line right there, the Missouri Compromise, said no slavery above it. Well, they wanted there to be slave and free in Kansas and Nebraska. And so what happens with this is they agree to make Nebraska a free territory and allow all the remaining territories to be determined by popular sovereignty. But what that does is make every person who had a vested interest in slavery rush to this area. The political party divisions of this time, you can see, I'm not going to make you know every political party, but if you look at this, you can see that almost all of them are divided on slavery, right? Slavery, different people, some people are pro-slave but anti-immigrant. Some people are anti-slavery and anti-immigrant. You have pro-slavery, but that are also pro-business. There's a very big division between not just slave and free, but north, south, business, and then international relations. Lots of divisions here. One party, the Know Nothings, basically their entire party is dedicated to being anti-immigrant. This was actually a photo of a flag they really had. Native Americans, be aware of foreign influence, saying we don't want any immigrants here. Very fascist. Then you have the Republican Party. This is the Republican Party of Abraham Lincoln. This is the first time it is going to emerge. And the Republican Party, as it exists today, technically it's the same party. Obviously, lots and lots and lots have changed, but this is the start of what would be considered the modern day Republican Party, though it is different. Ironically, women flocked to this because the Republican Party was all about freedom, not only for slaves, but the women viewed this as a way for them to perhaps push towards the rights that women will get eventually in 1919 under the 19th Amendment. So, in 1856, Republicans emerge as a challenger. The impact of this is they make it clear that they are here to play and that this is going to be a legitimate party, which we know will culminate into Abe Lincoln in 4 more years. Now, Bleeding Kansas was known as basically a miniature civil war. Pro-slave people rush there, free soilers rush there, and they quite literally get in a miniature civil war. Bleeding Kansas, and then what's going to become Bleeding Sumner, help the Republican Party illustrate, hey, look, slavery is so dangerous and so violent that even its most reasoned defenders end up debasing themselves into violence. So, South Carolina Senator Andrew Butler goes to defend Charles Sumner, who'd given this really intense speech about slavery being violent. And so he goes and he attacks him with a cane, beats him while he is working at his desk. So the bleeding Sumner and the bleeding Kansas ideas help to emphasize how violent slavery is and how it makes people violent is the argument that the Republicans were making. And the Dred Scott decision, not long after this, very difficult Supreme Court decision, because Dred Scott was a slave. He argued when his master took him to Wisconsin and Illinois, it made him free, even though they were from Missouri. The Supreme Court denied that. They ruled against him and declared that African Americans were not citizens, so they couldn't even bring the case. This was particularly frightening, especially because, remember, there were a good swath of free blacks in the North, in different places, Delaware, places like that. And so this was horrifying because it's saying that they were not people, that rather they were property even when they were in a free state. Abraham Lincoln is very unknown. In fact, it takes him 4 ballots to win the Republican nomination. He actually did not campaign on ending slavery. He did believe that it would not, the country couldn't permanently live half slave and half free, but he did want to stop the spread of it, even though he claimed that initially he didn't want to end it where it already existed. So he gets the spotlight by having these crazy long debates, obviously showing his extensive knowledge, makes a name for himself, and we know will win. John Brown at Harper's Ferry, this video, the video there, sort of a microcosm, again, one of those steps in the conflicts leading to the Civil War that illustrate that the only way this is going to stop is with violence. And it also illustrates that Southerners have, slaves in the South have had enough. So in 1860, Lincoln wins. I want you to look at this graph. Electorally, he definitely wins. Popular vote, he doesn't even win half, right? He won 40%, which means that over half of the country voted against him. You think we're divided now. 1860 would give us a run for our money even today. And so when he gives his inaugural speech, before he even gets the chance to give his speech and take office, South Carolina secedes. They secede on December 20th. By February 6th, others secede. And basically they say, Lincoln is not our president. If you look back at this last slide, Lincoln is not our president. None of us voted for him. We all voted for Breckinridge. And so we want to not be a part of this country. We want to have our own country. So even before he's able to take office. Now, in his inaugural speech, he claimed he had no lawful right to interfere with slavery where it existed. Now, we know that will change greatly in the Emancipation Proclamation, so I want you to do a little bit of reading here and see if you can figure out why he said initially he was not going to do that. 1861, right after he takes over, and we'll talk about this battle a little bit more, Confederate rebels take over the Carolina fort, and thus begins the Civil War.